Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3600. Today's date is September 19, 2025. It's been almost like a night at 9:24 p.m. All right, should we jump into the question directly? All right, let's jump directly into the question. Okay. All right. Question is, what if the speed of light was much slower? Okay, this is a really interesting question. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question? This question is a what if question, and why am I asking this question is because of that ki when I ask this what if question, I would kind of like a think about very different perspective of the kind of like a regarding about the question. Like as I mentioned, this question is kind of like a tell us that ki what if the speed of light would be much slower. It kind of like a simply when I try to think about that, I kind of like a think about as a light point of perspective. I need a kind of like a simply if I wanted to give the answer, I need a kind of like a proper knowledge and stuff like that. And when I try to explain this thing, somewhat might be kind of like a right or wrong, but kind of like I revise that information inside of my brain while giving this answer, and it kind of like a simply unlock little bit of potential about my knowledge and stuff like that. Okay, so that's why I'm kind of like asking this question. And what if question is really fun to ask, and like not only fun but kind of like a fun to kind of like a say the answer and things like that. It's really interesting when we try to give the answer. It gives kind of like a purpose of recording artifact. Okay, yeah. So should we jump? All right, yeah. So what if the speed of light is much slower? Okay, let me clarify what exactly is this thing. Okay, speed of light. What is exactly the speed of light? Okay, speed of light means like that the light is kind of like a how speed it comes emit from one place, reflect from another place, and the speed it went like okay. When you are in the school, you probably kind of like a notice or things like that ki the light comes from the sun to earth take 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Okay, yeah. So what is actually 8 minutes and 20 seconds? That 8 minutes and 20 seconds, that means the light will emit from the sun, and when it came to earth, it takes that much amount of time, 8 minutes 20 seconds. So that means a light has a particular speed. Okay, yeah. 3.10 to the power 8 meter per second square, probably it is too much. Okay, it is a really very highest speed. Okay, really very high speed. But what if we could imagine that ki, let's just say the speed of light is kind of like a simply equivalent to the speed of sound. Okay, what is the speed of sound? Speed of sound is almost like a 3000 3000 yeah, 3000 kilometer per hour. 3000, yeah, 3000 4000, probably, yeah, I'm not really sure, but 3000 4000 kilometer per hour. Okay, yeah. So it is actually much kind of like a simply like let's just imagine that what if the speed of light would be equivalent to the speed of sound, then what would be the reality? How do we supposed to kind of like how does it happen? Well, we might see kind of like a simply very delay. Okay, yeah, delay while everything. Okay, so what is actually why is this kind of like a delay and things like that? Okay, so let me give you how do you supposed to see. Okay, let me like a kind of like somebody trying to tell you that how do you kind of like somebody see some sort of stuff from your eyes. Okay, so I'm kind of like something at the rooftop. It's been almost like a 9:30 p.m. Like a little bit of dark. Okay, but there is a lot of kind of like a street light is actually available over here. So I'm actually kind of like getting so much amount of light. Okay, so how am I kind of like seeing some sort of stuff around me? Is because of that street light is emit some sort of light. Okay, light photon. Okay, that light is actually bounce on everywhere. Like basically it's not kind of like emit in one direction, it emits everywhere. Okay, it emit on floor, buildings, houses, trees, everything. And after they emit, they also kind of like reflect towards my eyes too. Okay, yeah, like basically they reflect everywhere. Everywhere means it also reflect in my eyes too. So when it reflect on my eyes, I could see the tree, I could see the light, I could see the everything. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing. The visual point of perspective is that there is a light is actually bounced back from some sort of stuff, and you actually kind of like a see some sort of stuff. It's kind of like a really if you not really understand, okay, yeah, I'm give you example. Okay, yeah, during the dark light, okay, yeah, there is nothing really at all, and you just have flashlight. Okay, yeah, you turn on the flashlight, and basically whenever you point your flashlight, you actually see only that particular area. You don't really see rest of the area. Why? Because the light is actually bounced back from that surface to your eyes, and that's why you could see that particular stuff. So this is what kind of like assembly how we actually see. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you one thing. When the speed of light is equivalent to the speed of sound, which is kind of like assembly much slower, okay, yeah, then what is actually happened that we might feel a lag. Okay, okay, what is actually lag? A lag means like that ki like basically the stuff that we are actually seeing is a kind of like assembly little bit blur or little bit kind of like assembly motion blur. Now what is actually motion blur? Okay, okay, so I'm gonna do experiment. You have to do the experiment same. It's not really that complicated. Okay, yeah. Look at your hand, palm of your hand. Okay, yeah. Now rotate your hand to your in front of your eyes. Okay, yeah. Just like basically just do this thing. Just like kind of like simply rotate. Okay, yeah. Can you see your finger? No, you are not seeing the finger. Like you are actually seeing a kind of like a blur of your hand. Why? This is called kind of like assembly motion blur. Okay, yeah. Let me tell you one thing. Our eyes are kind of like a simply seeing as a kind of like a simply a constant frame rate. Now what is the frame rate? Okay, I have to be kind of like a describe everything. Okay, yeah. Okay, you have mobile phone. Okay, yeah. Open your camera. Okay, yeah. Open your camera, and might be your camera is actually switched towards 1080 60 fps. Okay, or maybe 1080 4K. Okay, so what should you supposed to do? Go to the setting. Okay, yeah, turn into 1080p pixel and 24 frame rates, 24 or 30 frame rates. Like there is a kind of like option 30, 60 and 120, so on and so forth. Okay, so basically what should you supposed to do? Select the resolution at 1080p means HD, and set the kind of like a assembly frame rate at 30 fps. If you have 24 fps, then it would be even more better, but let's just say most of the phone mobile camera is actually comes from 30 fps, so let's took a 30 fps. Okay, yeah. Now you click that, you do that setting. Now press record. After you press record, like basically, and you pointed at anywhere. Okay, you pointed at anywhere, and kind of like a rotate your kind camera from kind of like assembly just clockwise, anti-clockwise, be very fastly. Okay, yeah. Now stop that recording. Record at least like a maybe 5 to 10 seconds. Okay, yeah. Stop that recording and see that recording. You actually seeing a kind of like a blur. Okay, yeah. Kind of like a assembly blur. Same thing that we are kind of like assembly seeing through eyes. Now how this is actually happened? Okay, so let me give you as a kind of like something as an example as a digital camera how it actually work, and then I will kind of like tell you regarding about how the eyes actually work. Okay, yeah. So when you record the video, okay, yeah, the video that you are actually seeing is not a video actually. It's a kind of like a simply combination of photos. What is actually that? Okay, so basically is this thing, when you switch 1080p resolution at 30 fps, and when you press the record, what is actually happened? 30 fps means like that 30 frame per second. Okay, yeah. Now what does it mean? It means that per second your camera of your mobile phone capture 30 photo. Okay, 30 photos. If you kind of like a simply expand like a basically 60 fps, that means your camera will kind of like a take 60 photo per second. If you went 120, then 120 photos per second. Okay, yeah. Now why I said 30 fps, like why I kind of like somebody let you to 30 fps is because of the motion blur. Okay, yeah. Now where is this motion blur came from? The motion blur came from when you have a lower fps. Okay, yeah. when you have lower FPS and everything is actually happen very fast, then everything feels kind of like a little bit blurry. Okay, little bit blurry. Same thing happened through your eyes, same thing happened through your camera. By the way, your camera actually far more equipped with a lot of technology, like your camera can shoot at 60 FPS too. Okay, yeah. But still, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, each video is a kind of like assembly takes 30 photo per second. Okay, so actually if you record the 8 second of video, so basically 30 into 8, like that means 240 photos is actually kind of like assembly combine and stitch together and consider as a kind of like assembly video. Okay, yeah. So this is called kind of like assembly video. Video means combination of multiple photos, right? So this is what kind of like assembly frame rate. Now exactly similar thing happened. Okay, by the way, our eyes does not kind of like assembly set at 30 fps or 24 fps. No, we don't really have that kind of like a frame rate. Okay, there is no one setting for our eyes and things like that, but our eyes are kind of like assembly bit more equivalent to 24 fps. Okay, yeah, which is kind of like assembly even lower than your mobile camera. Oh yeah, means like that your eyes are kind of like a seeing a blur very easily because of your eyes are actually kind of like a taking photos. It's not taking photos by the way, but kind of like assembly the information from cross through from your retina to brain to it takes time. Okay, yeah, for that particular process it kind of like a wind up everything into 24 fps. Okay, yeah. So probably what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, our eyes is actually kind of like a seeing everything in 24 fps. Okay, yeah. So when this 24 fps actually happen, when the things go fast, we might see the blur. Okay, because our eyes can't catch up with that thing. So that's why when you kind of like move your hand in front of your in front of your eyes very rapidly, you actually seen that particular blur. Okay, yeah, get it? So that is blur, that is called motion blur. Now let me tell you one thing, motion blur does not only associate with the frame rate, it associate with the light and it associate with the aperture. Now I'm not going to talk about the aperture. Okay, yeah, aperture is a camera thing, we are not going to talk about that. Let's talk about the light. Okay, yeah. So basically what you do is that I don't know where you are from. Okay, yeah, if you are kind of like something that in like in your surrounding maybe dark or something like that, what should you supposed to do? Okay, let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah, turn off the light. Okay, if there is kind of like a somebody day, then go to some place where is kind of like a dark light. Okay, like there is a dark. Okay, yeah. And what should you supposed to do is that turn on the camera, set the same resolution 1080p and 30 fps and kind of like somebody click the recording. Okay, yeah. Now make sure that there is no turn on, like do not turn on the flash. Do not turn on the flash. Okay, yeah, everything is kind of like somebody record by itself. Okay, yeah, do not kind of like do anything, do not kind of like put any HDR or any enhancement, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. If you have that thing, off it, or if you don't know it, okay, just record. Okay, because most of the camera might have kind of like a simply low light camera technology, because like most of the cameras kind of like adopt that thing. Okay, but whatever, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that when you have little less light, then probably that motion blur happen even more. Okay, yeah. Like same thing, yeah. What should you supposed to do is that set the camera 1080p 30 fps. Okay, yeah, shoot at like basically shoot shoot whatever it is. Okay, yeah, at without light, without flashlight, kind of like a shoot very rapidly, you actually see the blur. Okay, yeah. In the dark, sorry, you might not see any kind of like, you might see kind of like completely black frame, nothing really at all. You might kind of like see little bit of kind of like some smudges over here and there, but you might not see the kind of like a clarity. Okay, yeah. Now next video, what should you supposed to do is turn on the flashlight and kind of like do the same thing. Okay, 1080p 30 fps, turn on the flashlight and kind of like record that thing. When you turn on the flashlight, you actually seen couple of things. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that when in the dark, you might not see anything at all, or maybe you might see kind of like some sort of stuff, smudges or things like that, but not very clearly. And also motion blur is also there too. Okay, now with the flashlight, you are not actually kind of like you are kind of like seeing some sort of much better as compared to previous one, but you also get kind of like a simply motion blur. Okay, yeah. So have you understand the importance of light? Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you, what exactly is this thing? Okay, yeah. So when the source of the light is a kind of like a limited, then we actually see in that motion blur. Okay, yeah. So let me tell you one thing. When the light is kind of like somebody at the speed of sound, then probably what is actually happened that the time required to light bounce back from surface to your eyes takes time. Okay, yeah. And when it takes time, our body or our eyes would be moved at somewhere else. So basically the image is actually generated where we don't really see that particular things. So we might see a kind of like a simply a motion blur. Okay, we might see kind of like a delay, or we might gonna see a motion blur. And this motion blur we actually seen every day, like during the day, during the night was too much, but during the day was is gonna too much. Okay, if the kind of like a speed of light would be kind of like a simply uh, at the slower, okay, like at still like equivalent to the speed of sound. Okay, yeah. Now this is one thing. Another thing is that key time dilation. Okay, yeah. Now as I mentioned time dilation, okay, yeah, but still let me clarify what is the time dilation. A time dilation means like that ki when you kind of like simply run as fast as equivalent to the speed of light, you for you time would be kind of like a take very less. Okay, so what is actually happened, that means that ki if you kind of like a reach to the speed of light, then for you time would be kind of like a runs very slow. So what will gonna happen, it gonna happen that if you want to go from Bombay to New Delhi, okay, yeah, you book the flight, okay, yeah, and now you kind of like a sit on the plane, okay, yeah. Now let me tell you one thing. uh Basically is this thing that key when you travel from Bombay to New York, okay, yeah, like basically it takes almost like a 17-hour flight. Okay, yeah, 17-hour flight. But when you land over there, you realize that the entire flight is kind of like a happen in just kind of like a somebody just a couple of seconds. What do you mean by that couple of seconds? Like basically for you, you actually spend almost like a maybe like a basically is this thing like basically is this thing you actually kind of like a somebody feel that you actually kind of like a spend for a 17-hour of flight over there. But sorry, I'm completely wrong. Okay, yeah. If you kind of like a sit on the plane, okay, yeah, and kind of like a something you went from Bombay to New York, 17-hour of flight, okay, yeah. So you actually spend 17-hour of flight into that plane. But when you reach to the New York, okay, yeah, you might gonna kind of like a simply cross a century. Like literally you went to kind of like a simply into the future. What? Yeah, like okay, let me give you context. Okay, yeah, even more in detail. Okay, yeah. So basically you aboard the flight, okay, yeah, at what's today's date is 19th of September 2025. Okay, yeah, 19th of September 2025 you aboard the plane, okay, from Bombay. Okay, now the entire flight is almost like a 17-hour of long flight. Okay, yeah. So you actually kind of like a simply spend 17 hours over there. Okay, when you reach to the New York, you gonna reach at which time you gonna reach at maybe 19th of September 3025. 3000, almost like a century is gone. Like literally you just like for you just travel 17 hour, but for rest of the world you came from 100 year, like basically you travel 100 year. So this is what kind of like time dilation has actually happened, and you just went from Bombay to kind of like something in New York. And how this thing actually happened is because of the speed of plane is kind of like equivalent to the speed of sound. Like most of the plane are almost like a 2000, like basically 1500. Like I'm talking about the passenger plane. The passenger plane is kind of like somebody went at 1200 or maybe 1500 kilometer per hour. Okay, yeah, and the speed of sound is almost like a 3000. Okay, so probably when you are kind of like a try, you are achieving almost like a 50 to 60% of the speed of sound. while kind of like a going through just a passenger plane. Okay, yeah. If you went to fighter plane, then probably you're gonna achieve 100% of the speed of light, because the kind of like a, like basically most of the kind of like a fighter plane are kind of like a simply went much more faster, like basically Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 5. Like these are kind of like a things that the Mach 5 means like that 5 times speed of light. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: if you kind of like a simply went into the such a plane, Lockheed Martin Bomber B2, okay, yeah, which is kind of like a simply went into 10 Mach, okay, yeah, which 10 Mach means like that ki that Bomber B2 plane will kind of like a simply travel almost like a 10 times speed of light. 10 times speed of light, okay, yeah. So if you went to the 10 times speed of light, then probably for you, I'm not really sure, but probably time goes so forward. So forward. It means like that ki if you kind of like assembly aboard that plane from Bombay to New York, okay, so for you, you might gonna spend maybe like a maybe 7 hour, okay, yeah, because of the speeder, okay, yeah. But when you land in New York, you might gonna kind of like a feel that ki you arrive at almost like a 500 year after, like legit 500 year after. That means like in 2025, that means oh my god, like a 2525, okay, yeah, means 2525 at that year, okay, you actually arrive at New York. So this is what actually happened if the time is kind of like a something very slow. So time dilation would be kind of like a very common thing, okay, yeah. Even if you kind of like a took any kind of like a passenger plane or any kind of like a things, the time dilation is actually happened, okay, yeah. And you might gonna kind of like a somebody traveling through time, like basically time travel is kind of like a literally so common that you are kind of like somebody annoyed that stuff, okay, yeah. So this would be kind of like something happen. Then another thing is that ki, our like basically what I'm going to tell you, if I'm trying to imagine this thing that ki if the speed of light would be kind of like something much more slower, then probably I am not kind of like a simply thinking that this happened, this happened, this happened. I'm actually thinking that ki the entire evolution of existence will not gonna happen. Because let me tell you one thing now, the entire thing is kind of like actually depend on speed of light. Like basically the special relativity equation, the world famous equation E is equal to mc square. What is actually C stand for? A C means speed of light. Okay, yeah. And the speed of light is kind of like a very essential building block for kind of like a building our universe and things and that. Speed of light has to be kind of like much more faster, because if the speed of light is not faster, then nuclear fission will not gonna happen. Nuclear fission will not gonna happen. Then sun will not gonna see that much brighter. If the sun is not that much brighter, then probably it has very less gravity. When it has a little less gravity, then probably there is no many kind of like a planets that should revolve around there. And before that, there is no kind of like some universe will gonna create. Or maybe there is a big bang happen, but big bang would be not that much bigger, okay. And the rest of the kind of like planets and everything will not gonna kind of like somebody form, is because of the kind of like somebody less space and things like that. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that the speed of light is a very essential part, okay. I'm just kind of like tell you the example, just kind of like just a fun way to kind of like explain this thing stuff and that, like. But if I'm trying to go from kind of like somebody in very details now, it's just not gonna happen. Not okay. Let's just take a sun. Okay, let's just take a sun. If the speed of light would be kind of like something very slower, then our sun would be not that much brighter. If the sun is not that much brighter, then what will gonna happen? That the Goldilocks zone would be changed. What's the Goldilocks zone? Like basically is this thing, the Earth is actually in the Goldilocks zone. Okay, that means the light is kind of like a not too much and not too less. It's kind of like a very perfect balance of light. Okay, yeah. But because in this particular situation, the kind of like a speed of light is really slow, that means the sun is kind of like a little less bright. So when it is little less bright, then probably is this thing, our Goldilocks zone is kind of like a much more closer to the sun, which might be kind of like a equivalent to the orbit of Mercury or things like that. Okay, because this is kind of like a orbit where it could be kind of like something called as a Goldilocks zone. Okay, yeah. And another thing is that because of kind of like a simply the less light, that means our sun would be not that much big. Like our sun would be kind of like a simply size of kind of like a Jupiter. Because let me tell you one thing now, because it has a kind of like a simply the nuclear fusion will not gonna happen, because like it gonna happen but it takes time, dude. The nuclear fusion means like that the reactive material actually happen when the 4 hydrogen atom combined together takes 1 helium and kind of like a rest of the energy, and that energy exploded to the speed of light. This will not gonna happen, or this will happen with very slow rate. And when it happened with a very slow rate, then probably is this thing that sun would be not that much expand that much. And when the sun will be not that much expand, then probably the light would be kind of like a little less. And when the light would be little less, the size of the planet would be little less, the gravity would be little less too. Okay, yeah. So that means let me tell you one thing, we might not have a kind of like a something the like a beyond the Mars, we might not have a rest of the planet, nothing really at all. We might not have Jupiter, we might not have Neptune, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. And another thing that because of the speed of light, we might not have that many big star or big planet. Okay, because let me tell you one thing because of the gravity would be very less. So the gravity would be really less, then probably the building blocks for kind of like a creating humongous amount of planets and star will not gonna form. And when it not gonna form, then probably all the kind of like some gases, clouds and things would be condensed in very small accumulated area, and kind of like considered as a small planet would be created. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, if the speed of light would be much slower, then probably entire universe would become smaller and slower, and kind of like everything would be small. Everything would be small, because these are very essential building blocks of kind of like a construction of the universe. It's a very very essential. Okay. so basically there is, okay, if I'm trying to imagine now, there is lot of kind of like consequences. Okay, yeah. Like basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, the universe that we might gonna see is not really that much big, or maybe kind of like somebody our earth would be kind of like a much more smaller, like literally much more smaller. Also another thing that we might not evolve that much. Okay, yeah. Or another thing that because of earth has a kind of like something very small, that means have little less gravity. So having little less gravity, that means we might not have a moon. Okay, we might not have a moon, because moon is kind of like a tidally locked with our earth because of the gravity and things like that. So basically is this thing, if the earth has a little less gravity, then probably moon would not gonna form. Like basically is this thing that the any kind of like some celestial object which supposed to be orbit around any kind of like a planet really required to kind of like close to each other. So basically if I'm gonna say, if the moon has to be revolved, then it should supposed to be revolved very close to the sun, very close to our earth. Okay, and when it kind of like very close to the earth, it might gonna have chances that it gonna collide or it gonna go away. Okay, yeah. So probably is this thing, it might gonna collide or it might gonna go away. So probably is this thing that we basically we might not have moon, or we might not have any kind of like any celestial kind of like object that revolve around us. And not only earth, rest of the planet too. Like basically is this thing, the Jupiter has almost like a 62 satellite. Okay, yeah. They might not have that thing. Okay, yeah. Nothing really at all. Even if like Jupiter will not gonna become that much bigger, because still is that kind of like somebody little less light, little less gravity, little less space. So it just everything becomes small. Everything just became, it's not kind of like a small that you think it is. It's kind of like a small means like that kind of like a size of kind of like a somebody earth. Okay, yeah. And and basically our earth size would be kind of like a somebody size of our Pluto. Okay, yeah. So this would be kind of like a something happened literally, yeah. Also another thing, having little less gravity, that means that our planet would not gonna look sphere. It gonna look like kind of like a meteor. What do you mean by that? Okay, let me tell you one thing. Okay, so having little less gravity, that means what? Like basically is this thing that the entire planet is actually revolve around itself and things like that. If any kind of like a celestial object will kind of like a revolve, it kind of like a degraded and kind of like a creators kind of like a spherical shape. Spherical shape is a kind of like a geography point of perspective. It's a kind of like a very solid block, so that it could kind of like sustain that centripetal and centrifugal force. Okay, yeah. But because of the gravity has little less, then there is no kind of like a resistance or kind of like impact to kind of like make that particular shape. So mostly kind of like a some planet would be kind of like a giant meteor, would kind of like a have very weird shape. Yeah, literally weird shape. Like our Earth would be not kind of like a look like a spear. It would be kind of like a look like a kind of like a meteor, a giant meteor, which kind of like a look like a kind of like a stone or stuff like that. And this would be kind of like something happened. This would be kind of like something reality. Okay, yeah. So this is like and because if I'm kind of like thinking about that size and shape and things like that, then the geography would be really crazy. The ocean will not gonna form, the mountain will gonna form, nothing will gonna, like basically this thing, there is nothing is will gonna create, nothing will at all. Okay, so probably is this thing, if I'm like basically is this thing that speed of light is a kind of like a not only essential, but it's very utmost important for creation of our universe, right? Yeah. So if the light would be much more slower, then we might not exist. Actually our planet is not exist, actually our solar system is not exist, actually our universe might gonna exist, but kind of like in very small and things. And yeah, it is that, it would be really that. By the way, like basically when I'm kind of like asking this question, what if question, I'm kind of like getting lot of kind of like some this topic to cover. Like basically is this thing that Goldilocks zone and stuff I talk, like basically like I do know that, but it just like when I ask this question, I just like, dude, where ye gyan kahan se aa gaya mere paas? I was kind of like thinking that where it came from. Like basically, I watch bunch of kind of like some scientific videos and stuff like that, but I never really kind of like thought that ki I might have this information locked inside of my brain. But when I try to talk about that stuff, I just connect the dot, everything just gut. I don't know how these things actually happen. But this what if question is like a really interesting. Like basically, I really love to talk about that. Like basically, if there is no time constraint, now I will gonna talk about. Like by the way, there is no time constraint at all. I'm gonna record whatever the time that I want. But it's just like that, na. Ki, it felt really good. It felt something that ki, when I ask this what if question, it just kind of like gives you that purpose to record the artifact and things like that. And it felt really good too. By the way, let's just end here. This is it, and thank you.